What I want to talk about today is web application security. I have nothing to sell, no products, no services. I have pictures. So my pictures are going to talk about things that'll keep you interested in how hacking happens online, kind of why and what you should really be worried about. We all know there are bad things online. People want to crack into a web application or site, and they can do it in a variety of ways. And they cause trouble. They'll deface your website, they'll take over your server, steal credit cards, do all sorts of things that you don't want them to do. This world's ugliest pie chart is actually real data from the Open Web Application Security Group, talking about all the different kinds of things that people do, and there's some dangerous stuff happening. So who are these people and what are they up to? So, we go out there and we're worried about these mythical hackers, and we want to protect ourselves. So our typical reaction is, let's block them. Let's put some walls up. Let's do what we might have done way back in the days, keep those barbarians out. So if you were faced with a wall, what would you do with it? Well, you'd probably climb over it. So the problem that we're seeing is that with a lot of people in the network space, they buy these appliances, they do these things, and sadly, it's about like the unmanned wall. They're manning the defenses, all right. They're not paying much attention. It seems as if they're not really awake. And even when they are awake, I'm not really sure what they're seeing, because if they were paying attention, they would be seeing that there's a whole bunch of bad things happening on the internet right now. Any site that anybody has right now, if it has any decent amount of traffic, is probably getting a lot of intrusion attempts on it. And what we're noticing is that when you talk to people about this, it seems as if they think that intrusion attempts are like lightning strikes and they happen every so often. There's generally a lot of doorknob jiggling going on at any given moment. And so we really want people to kind of pay attention to this, but they don't. And they don't seem to pay attention to the real world's worst pie chart here, that the toolbox of things that these people can do is absolutely overflowing. And they all have nice little names, SQL injection and cross-site scripting and all sorts of different kinds of things. But they're going to all fundamentally be based upon a couple of key flaws that we'll get to. Now, a surface area seems to be getting bigger rather than less. We know that they can intrude on our apps through our browsers, through Port 80, through plugins, all sorts of different kinds of things. And it's extending well beyond the enterprise. It's going out to social media networks and so on, and it's bringing trouble to us. So when we look at the people attacking us, we're noticing that they tend to come in two categories. And category one of the new form of Robin Hood movie here is the ones who just kind of charge right at you, throwing all sorts of different kinds of random things, hoping that you haven't patched your system, and then they'll own you. And this is actually successful. That's why they do it. It's basically a law of numbers thing. There's enough sites out there to try that they'll get in on occasion. Then you've got attacker type 2, the real Robin Hood, not like the new Russell Crowe movie, but where you actually sleep over the drawbridge because you're pretending to be a peasant. It's fairly easy to do this kind of stuff, to go underneath the radar, and these people are much harder to deal with. The good news is there's hardly any of them. Now, you've got these two types of attackers, so what are you going to do? Well, if you were smart, you'd think like a bouncer. You've got this protected area, and you're only going to let some of the cool people come in to your club. And if they're not on the list, they're not coming in. Apparently, though, the way that we do things in the internet community is we have the opposite idea. The list is of the bad people, so everyone else is assumed to be good. That's kind of the wrong idea. That doesn't really work. Generally, people are not going to say, oh yeah, I'm bad, don't let me in. They're not going to identify themselves this way. They're going to change it so that they look a little bit different. And so unfortunately, your bouncer only has a list of the naughty people. A new naughty person comes up to you and gets in, and we now give it a euphemism, and we call it a 0 day. As in other words, you have the absolute wrong, backwards way of doing things. Your attitude now is that you go back to the vendor and say, oh, well, I guess we need to update our signature files. Please pay me more. This is protection racket. I mean, this is not the way to do things, but it's a great business model. So if you can get it, you should set that up as a business model. I like it quite a bit. So the problem that we have is that we really actually have mostly the appearance of security. The reality is that this is not going to protect your car. I mean, you might feel good about putting it on there. It has a nice locking sound. But anybody that has any skill is going to kind of laugh about this. Well, that's kind of the reality of most web security. So the situation with security is nothing unlike the real world. I can have security. That tank's pretty secure. I doubt you're going to be able to shoot me very easily unless you can open up the lid and get in there or something. But it's kind of big and expensive and lumbering and slow. So I don't really like that. I want to go fast. So I have a trade-off here. If I go too fast, I don't have too much armor. If I go too slow, well, I may have a lot of armor, but I have my problems. And that's just life. So it turns out the real enemy online is us. The hackers aren't the problem, we're the problem. Because we seem to think that there are no trade-offs, that you don't have to do anything, you can have everything. You could do Homer, and you could put all the features together and have something that doesn't work. And so that's what we see all the time, is that we see people really aren't getting real about things. Engineering always has trade-offs. You can have slogans, appliances, clouds. The only thing that will work for you is magical wishes. If you had magic, that would work. Unfortunately, we do not have magical wishes. There's nothing that will perfectly secure us. Nothing in the world of any form of security is perfect. That's just the simple reality. So does that mean don't do it? No way. We need to get real. So there's examples of people not being real. We use open source. We're secure. Really? Think about that now. The bad guys actually can look at the source code, and they can look at it a lot. And they can figure out where the holes are before other people plug them. They say, well, but that doesn't happen. Really? I mean, why don't you check any advisory list and look at the number of vulnerabilities for known systems like Drupal and WordPress? There are hundreds of them. Now, unless you're keeping up with this literally on a daily or weekly basis, you are a very rich target of opportunity. Now, does this mean don't use open source? No, but it just doesn't mean you just immediately say, well, dismiss the problem of security because you're using open source. You say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Everyone uses that. Well, yes, they do. Everyone eats McDonald's. That doesn't make it a good hamburger. I mean, this is logical fallacies. And so we see that people tend to make a lot of evaluations based upon some rather interesting ideas, such as basically might makes right, or argument of the masses or something. Or how about inspection? Oh, they look like they're a reputable vendor. I don't think I can make a diagnosis of Mr. Clooney here just by looking at him. I don't think I can look at a website and just observe it and say that's a well-built one. I mean, that doesn't work. And so what we're running into is that people really have some very kind of silly ideas. We see a lot of people spending lots and lots of money, and we're not seeing any correlation of security and money. We're seeing a lot of very expensive systems circumvented with very, very minor techniques. And we're seeing some systems that don't have a lot of money spent that are highly secure. It's really quite frustrating to see a lot of the challenges we run into. Other challenges we're seeing quite a bit of is this customization trade-off. We see lots and lots of features being thrown at sites and applications and so on, and people not acknowledging that the more things that you add, the bigger your problems get. In that you basically adopt all the security of anybody that you bring into your fold. So when you see these companies building bigger and bigger applications, tying more and more web services, you have what I call the third-party security party. You have exactly all their security as yours. And so what we're noticing is that we find even very, very secure companies being intruded upon just because somebody copy-pasted one script into their website from a third party. And this is a rather dangerous situation because the enemy that we have is us. We've made this the target-rich environment. It's not that the hackers have gotten really good at what they do. We basically have put our pants down on the ground, and then when we get intruded upon, we pull it up and say, oh, that's just random bad luck or something. It's not. We've added this. So what we should have been doing is trusting nothing, because the internet is filled with people all over the world that could do you harm. But the problem is it's pretty observable that we don't do that. I'm not terribly cynical about this. You can see this pretty clearly. If I go to an arbitrary website, I can probably tell you exactly how they've implemented it. I can tell you exactly what technology they're using, exactly what kind of databases they're using, everything. I shouldn't be able to know this. This is not information that anybody other than bad people really need to know. This is the idea of kind of wearing the orange jumpsuit when you're walking around Baghdad. I mean, yeah, it's not going to protect you from bullets, but don't bring attention to yourself. There's really no good reason to do this. So we're seeing a lot of marketing ideas actually hurting us, like our site proudly powered by WordPress. Why would you want to tell people that? I mean, how is that helping you secure it? So, you see it just poking a website, just ask it, for a wrong page, and it will dump you stack traces and show you source code. This is fairly easy to do. You can just try it on arbitrary sites. You'll see it all over the place. Debugging information is wonderful stuff to figure out how to crack somebody's site. So, I'd say probably on average, maybe a third of the sites I touch, I can cause them to barf in this manner. I mean, it's pretty sad how prevalent this is. Other kinds of things that we'll see is just you can literally browse people's environments. These are actual live sites we just take pictures of, and go in and find hidden directories and things like this just by guessing in a lot of cases. The real problem is that once you go in there, you'll find things you shouldn't find. Like you'll actually reveal their source code. They'll have scratch files and all sorts of things that are up online. You can just download and they'll have their database passwords in there and all sorts of things. In fact, it's so bad that a lot of hackers don't even bother to go to the sites. You just form a Google query to find it because Google has indexed the information and put it in their index. And so if you know how to query for the right kind of thing, you can actually find this. They call this Google hacking. So there's a lot of examples of this online. So I give a lot of talks on web security. These are just two examples from two recent ones. I gave a Magento talk and a Sitecore talk. And all I did was pick out the list of some of their top customers, and I get right to their login pages. They're just wide open on the internet. I mean, you could just guess them in their default locations. Why should anybody around the world be able to get to someone's admin application? I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, people in Vietnam or Romania or whatever have no need to be able to go to this university's login page. I'm sure if I poke it harder, it will find it has default passwords on it too. And this was quite a disturbing trend that we've seen. It seems to happen every single time that we give these presentations. There's a lot of security by obscurity. Now, even if they can just find it, the question is, okay, well, what's the password? Can I break in? Well, let's assume that they've changed the default. Now it's time to try to guess the password. Well, half the systems don't have retry limits, and they're not looking at their logs. And so it's just a matter of putting a bot on it and keep guessing until you get in, which isn't terribly difficult to do. And since they don't look at their logs, they're using Google Analytics or something to look at things. They don't see the attempts. So there you go, get out there, and you say, oh, I got weak passwords. So then I'll make everybody use strong passwords. Guess what happens when you make them use strong passwords? They reuse them everywhere. And so then they write them down and they use them on every single site that they go. And so all the sites that they use them on, when they get hacked on those sites, you are now disclosed. And you say, well, that doesn't happen. LinkedIn, anybody? I mean, all sorts of sites have been cracked recently, and they store their passwords in plain text. So, or in very, very weakly encrypted kind of stuff. So you end up getting the security posture of all these other sites that have nothing to do with you because people end up using their passwords all over the internet. So then you give one of these out and you hope, well, this will save me. This will keep me from getting hacked because I've now got one of these second form tokens and they have to have that. Except when you found out last year that the hackers went after this and got this database. So, the reality is there's no such thing as perfect security, but we got to do our best. And one of the things that we're running into is that you can't limit security thinking to just the enterprise because you're on the job all the time. So go to a public Wi-Fi and watch what's flying around the network. You'll see all sorts of good stuff. You'll see people logging into systems, it's unencrypted, you can grab all sorts of stuff. It's so bad they made it push button easy. They had this thing called Firesheep where you can sit in a browser and it'll just show all the Facebook and Twitter and so on, people logging in, and you just assume their identities. Just press a button and boom, you're looking at what their screen is showing. So this kind of grab and go access isn't terribly complicated at all. And yet it seems like it's supposedly elite. Not really. You've got a lot of 12-year-old, 13-year-old hackers just reading a tutorial and installing it. The reality is that security systems, even if you have all the latest stuff, are most perverted by the people. We've seen a couple of demonstrations of this. One big security consultancy just put up a fake entry for a VP in the company in LinkedIn and just did a single friend request. And within a week, there were tons of connections to this person. They were passing sensitive information to him. And he was a non-legitimate individual online. He was a fake persona, basically. They just picked somebody in the directory who didn't have a LinkedIn profile, put their picture up, and got information leaked. This is a big company that does work for the federal government. So this kind of stuff is absolutely frightening. There's very little understanding of this circle of trust. The reality is that what I'm always saying is that on the internet, you absolutely cannot trust anything. If you, as soon as you start trusting things, you start to get yourself in hot water. Like, this is the simplest example, like SQL injection. Somebody looks at that URL and says, well, let me see what happens if I just try to put something in there. Well, any guesses what's going to happen? I dump their database. I'm looking at all their press releases, including the ones that are coming up. I'm sure it's going to allow me to drop the table too. I mean, the problem that we're running into is that we have a lot of these apps and they're built very badly, and then when they get hacked, we blame it on the eliteness of the hacker. And we call it SQL injection, all this. No, you built it wrong, and you hired the wrong people to do it. And so, but we can't really come to understand this. So we can't understand that we trusted inputs. We let people post script tags to our comment blocks and then got cross-site scripted. This is, again, why are you allowing people to put this kind of stuff into the fields? This is not the hackers doing anything terribly interesting. It's pretty much, again, pants are on the ground. It's the same with cookies. I mean, if a cookie's flying around on the network, you can just copy it. You can call it something fancy. You can call it session hijacking or something like this, but it really is just, again, you trusting data that you shouldn't trust. You should assume that it's been tampered with. So it seems like we almost market security. We say to ourselves, if we could come up with a very, very interesting phrase, clickjacking or session hijacking or whatever you want to call it, that somehow makes it go away, that we just simply trusted data we shouldn't have trusted. That's really all it tends to be. Simple things like this. I copy and paste that little script tag on the bottom there into your website. They own me. That site can do whatever it wants to me. So if that site ever got hacked, I got hacked. Their JavaScript can rewrite my page, make it look like Wells Fargo, do whatever they want to do. Okay, so I'll call that a worm, a Facebook worm. No, that's called a trust relationship. You trusted other people and their trust was breached. And so the challenge that we run into on the web is that it really all boils down to simple ideas of trust. Oh, and then of course this is your site on DDoS. The electronic sit-in, everybody hits your site hard and you crash. You know, that's a different story entirely. So you want me to be done already? I've said the same thing a million times, so what should I do? Well, I can throw money at it. I think I already said before, that's probably not gonna do what you need to do if you don't change the posture. I think it's the tools, you need the tools, but it's the tools coupled with the right attitude. You do that, you got what you need. So the reality is that tech can't solve our problems. If you read this little cartoon, it kind of says it all. And you could insert firewall, magic box, whatever you want to do. But you know, if somebody really wanted to get the guy's password, the $5 wrench solution works just fine. It's the same with cracking other systems and so on. So security has to be a holistic thinking pattern. It isn't just one thing. And you definitely need to send your developers back to school. They can't trust anything, and unfortunately, they mostly trust everything. And they don't block things, they don't change things, and that's just the root of the whole problem. If you change that, you're gonna go 99% better than most websites out there. But even if you do all that, you probably should still have something beyond that. So an application firewall or something does make sense. It's a secondary form of protection. I mean, if your apps are screwed up, you should put one in right away. But no matter what you do, you can't set it and forget it. If you're not paying attention, if you're not manning the defenses like we started out with, eventually something bad will happen. So that's it. I don't think I'll take any questions other than off the stage, but thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my pictures.